Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy. The New Orleans Saints have until April 17th, so another week, to bring in prospects to work them out, interview them, test them, that whole type deal before the NFL draft. And the Saints, last year, of the players that they brought in, actually did draft Kendre Miller and Jordan Howden. Those are guys that they did bring in for workouts and interviews and kind of vetted that entire situation, felt good about it, and made that decision. They're in the process of doing that as well, and not all of these visitors get out. They're not all reported. Sometimes they are, but they're not always. And so I can't tell you everyone the Saints have brought in for an interview. There's an aggregate at Pro Football Network that is putting these together. The Saints actually have the smallest number on this list of names. There are some teams that have got 8, 10, 12, 14 players that they've reportedly brought in. The Saints is sitting at 4. It's Marshawn Lloyd, a defensive end from Western Michigan, Christian Boyd, a defensive tackle from Northern Iowa, Dylan Labe, a running back from New Hampshire, and then the one I wanted to talk about today was Marshawn Lloyd, the running back from Southern Cal. I could just say running back from USC because he went to both. He went to USC in California. He also went to South Carolina, the USC here in the Southeastern Conference. He spent 3 years as a Gamecock. Last year, transferred to Southern California and had a really nice season for the Trojans. He played in 11 games, had 116 carries, so just over 10 carries a game, 820 yards on 7 yards per carry. He scored 9 touchdowns. He caught 13 passes, averaged 17.8 yards per catch on those 13 pass catches. So I looked at the tape. He's a little undersized, looking at about 5'10", 5'9", but he's got some game-breaking ability. He can make some guys miss. And I think drafting a running back is a reasonable thing to do for the Saints in this draft. We've talked about this a lot. The Saints have so many needs that it's really hard for them to screw it up. Like, there's not a lot of positions where they were drafted to be like, what? I think if they drafted a cornerback, I would maybe raise my brow a little bit. But outside of that, like, you can pretty much draft almost anywhere. In my opinion, Alvin Kamara is not going to be on the next really good Saints team. In my opinion, Jamal Williams is not going to be on the next really good Saints team. Those two guys are at the back half of their careers, and I don't think the Saints are going to have a great year next year. That's my opinion. Marshawn Lloyd and Kendre Miller could be, and they'd be cheap in the short term. I think the Saints getting a young, affordable running back makes some sense. I know they did it last year with Kendre Miller, and we don't really know what Kendre Miller is. He missed too much time. There were flashes. We know what he was at TCU. Heavy usage on the ground in his last year. Not as much through the air, and they actually threw him the football a little bit this year when he was healthy. But I think turning the page makes some sense at running back. Look, I didn't think that bringing in Jamal Williams was a bad deal last year. Kamara was up in the air legally. Williams had been really productive in Detroit, leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and you were still trying to push forward to win the division. And I think that's a deal that made some sense in that way. If you draft Marshawn Lloyd, I'm not really sure you're going to use him a ton. You could. He could go out there and camp and win the job. But he may be a guy that you're looking for some production from in 2025, 2026, 2027. And I think that's the timeline the next time the Saints are going to be good. So anything that you add that is cheap and may help you in the future, but certainly doesn't hurt you in the future, I'm for. And I think grabbing a running back like this, or if it's Dylan Labe, who I can't even pretend to know a lot about. He played at New Hampshire. But you can find running backs just about anywhere. I mean, the most famous instance of that for the Saints is obviously Pierre Thomas. You can do it a couple of ways. You can do it the Pierre Thomas way. You can get an undrafted player, sign them, and they can be really, really good. Or you can do it the Mark Ingram, Deuce McAllister way and draft them way early in the draft. I don't want the Saints to do that in this situation. But and then there's, the third way, which is take Kamara in the, third round and see how it goes. Turns out, spoiler, it went really well. But obviously that's not a spot at the 14th, 15th pick in the draft that you're going to take a running back if you're the Saints. But you got all these fifth rounders. I'm good taking a young, cheap running back. That to me does make sense. We've spent all this time talking about Olu Fashanu, talking about Brock Bowers, talking about Brian Thomas, talking about Dallas Turner. All our focus, because it's more fun, is to talk about the first round pick. And in Saints years past, the first round pick has meant so much because maybe that's the missing piece to get you over the top. That's why you go get Olave. That's why you feel like Marshawn Lattimore is the dude. You thought maybe you could fill in Trevor Penning and he would be the left tackle, and that would be a huge piece to you winning the division. And that's why the Saints are trading assets to move up and get that one guy. Fact of the matter is, in these next two drafts, at least, the ones that are the most important might be the 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. You've got to find some people to help your football team late in the draft. And we'll show up here after we go do our draft party on that Thursday night, and we'll come back Friday and we'll talk bluntly and probably excitedly about the first selection the Saints make. But know that that's one guy. You've got a bunch of holes. What the Saints are able to do in uncovering assets for your team late in the draft is just going to be monumental. You can miss on a couple of 6-rounders with Breeze at quarterback. You can't do that now. And while it's really fun to talk about Fashanu, and it's really fun to talk about Brock Bowers, and that's what we've done most of the time over the last 3 weeks, the real story is going to be told by what they do late. I'm interested by them bringing in a defensive tackle from Northern Iowa. You've invested a lot in that position in the last offseason with 2 free agents and a first-round pick. Do you need to add to that? Marshawn Lloyd, defensive end, can he rush the passer? If you're not going to address that right up at the top because you're taking an offensive tackle, and maybe you're taking an offensive tackle with your second pick in the draft, can you find an edge rusher that can help you, like you did with Trey Hendrickson, a little bit later in the draft? Maybe Marshawn Lloyd is a guy like that. And then running back is just not something we've talked about at all. We have not mentioned running back at all on this show in the last 3 weeks because the Saints aren't taking a running back in the first round. But I wonder what they think about Kendre Miller at this point. And does it make sense to go get another running back late? I'd be okay with it. You're going to eventually turn the page from Alvin Kamara sooner than later. And Jamal Williams isn't going to be here a long time. Wasn't super productive last year. The only Jamal Williams headline from last football season was the late touchdown he scored against the Falcons that caused an absolute grease fire with Jameis and Dennis Allen and the whole Falcons brass and Arthur Smith. And that was the biggest headline we saw from the Saints running back acquisition was a controversial touchdown in kneeling time in the last game of the season. So we'll see. I think it's interesting. The Saints could look linebacker, could look running back later on in the draft. Hey, it's Hunt. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.